Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Risk Matrix Videocast podcast.
The Risk Matrix, roll tide, baby.
And as we know, that's James Junkin. He's the co-host of this podcast, and I'm Dr. Martin. And together we're going to talk to you today about ESG, Environment, Social, and Governance, which is a big initiative now in a lot of companies. But before we do that, today's episode of the Risk Matrix by Veriforce is sponsored by Mariner Gulf Consulting and Services. Occupational safety and health policies and procedures represent the foundation of a functioning and executable safety management system. Using a customized approach, Mariner Gulf's technical writing group works with your team to develop customized policies and procedures that meet regulatory standards, third-party verification requirements, industry best practices, and have withstood hundreds of hiring client audits and OSHA inspections. Get your customized and compliant programs today by visiting marinergulf.veriforcenetwork.com and receive up to 25% off your purchase. Hello, James.
Good morning, Dr. Martin. Today, you're in
ready?
the Matrix.
I'm in the Matrix
today.
I'm in the Matrix. You're in the Matrix. We're all in the Matrix. And roll tide.
Roll tide.
I'm sorry, I didn't respond. Roll tide. Today we're going to talk about ESG. And as you know, I wrote an article with Nikolai from Veriforce about ESG for,
right
there you
here.
go, the Professional Safety Journal, March, I think it was March 2023 it was published. So what is environmental social governance? And you know what, I'm going to let you tell me what that is in your terms, and then we'll talk a little bit about why it means something to safety professionals.
Well, I think ESG is in a lot of ways a repackaging of what has been historically known as sustainability. Sustainability, maybe beginning in the 1970s and gaining a foothold now as the world, particularly the EU, has more formalized in certain standards an environmental safety and governance package that has been adopted by many companies and organizations within the United States now as a metric of basically corporate responsibility. That's sort of my viewpoint on where I see ESG right now.
Yep. So I agree with you. Environment, social governance. There's three prongs to this. But what I will say is, I think a lot of safety professionals are seeing ESG come up on their radar because historically, if anybody in a company can tie something to safety, they do. I think ESG it could be tied to the corporate governance structure. It could be tied to sustainability if you have that in your corporate structure, which a lot of companies, if they're smaller or they're not as sophisticated, they don't have a sustainability department. So, just like environmental concerns back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s kind of fell on the safety professionals, that's what's happening now with ESG, right? They're saying, what do you know about this, right? And some safety professionals know a lot, some don't. But the way I'll break it down, and I agree with you, it has to do with sustainability, but it also has to do with a lot of other things. It has to do with your supply chain, managing your supply chain, making sure they're doing everything on the up and up. Making sure they're not hiring child labor in third world countries, making sure they're sourcing their products in a good way. And why? Because a lot of times when investors come in and they look for something to invest in, they want to be associated with people who are doing the right thing, people who are managing their supply chain, who are making the right choices for the environment. They're being ethical. And they're using sustainable practices.
Well,
so go ahead.
Where I see, come into contact with this is, like everything else related to occupational safety and health, a lot of this is hiring client driven. And many hiring clients are well on their way in their journey with ESG. Others are just trying to begin to determine what their ESG platform or package might be. What are our policies? What are our programs? What are our metrics? And as this filters down, particularly in the oil and gas industry, into the supply chain, because that's where the risk is. You know, when we're talking about many hiring clients, they're not generating a lot of carbon when we start talking about carbon, but their supply chain is generating carbon. And so carbon reduction, carbon, net zero goals, things of that nature that you see in a lot of advertisements, that really is falling directly on the supply chain. And as you reduce the size of the organization, a lot of times I see the reduction in the understanding of ESG and what we're supposed to be doing. And that is falling almost entirely on the shoulders of the safety professional. And I'm going to tell you why it's falling on the shoulders of the safety professional. Because ESG metrics, for the most part, are being tracked using some type of third-party verification system like Veriforce. Well, who manages the third-party verification system? The safety professional. So it presents a different skill set because, like you said, Dr. Martin, we talk a lot about HSE, but in reality, a lot of what we do is HS. There's not a lot of training on the E. I'm just going to be honest with you. I got a master's degree in occupational safety and health. There was no E or very little E in my coursework for as a safety professional. So we even call it a safety professional. We don't call it an environmental professional, right? So all of that is got up into this gumbo of stuff that gets dumped in practicing safety professionals' lap, particularly because there was no other place for it. If you didn't have a sustainability department and all of a sudden now you're worried about ESG, who's it going to go to? And a lot of times it's going to the occupational safety and health professional.
So let me just tag team with you on that. Back when I was, full-time safety director with the company and not doing consulting work or teaching, and this was 8 or so years ago, third-party verification systems were already tracking a lot of these efforts, right? And I mean, I was looking at this stuff saying, what is this? Like, why are we talking about carbon emissions? That really has nothing to do with me. But I did have to do a lot of the calculations that were involved in that, and just to get the system to go green, right? And have everything in there. And I think maybe some of that did come from Europe and a lot of the European Union countries, because, they are a little bit more advanced than us. And now in the last year or two, we've seen ESG come up as a topic here in the US too, either because companies are held by European companies, or we have a global footprint, right? And so that becomes relevant. But also because, as safety professionals, we've seen this trend of we pick up the things that kind of fall under a realm, and then we end up owning it, right? And that's not a bad thing. And I'll tell you why. I think if you look at a lot of the ESG articles that are coming out these days, not just my article with Nikolai for Veriforce, but other articles, they will fit safety under either the sustainability or environmental or the governance portion. They will fit it somewhere under the metrics. Okay?
I think it goes really well in the S, the social, because we're talking about people, right? And people are definitely the social part of ESG.
But they have fitted in under the different topics. And what I like about that is, and you and I have talked about this before, metrics are all intertwined, right? It's not just TRIR for safety anymore. It's how are all these metrics working together in concert to make a safe, sustainable, environmentally conscious, ethically run company. And I think that's only good for everybody, right? We can look at our metrics holistically as opposed to some kind of target that may not be taking into account things that we should be taking into account when we look at accidents and injuries or all those types of things. So, you know, I think I see ourselves as a piece within ESG, but I can also see why we're becoming kind of the holders of ESG, right? There are some professionals that are doing that now just as their primary thing, right? But by and large, the people that I've talked to at the NSC conference when I spoke, and that I've talked at Veriforce events, they are asked, how do we get these metrics out of what we're doing, right? And I'd like you to talk a little bit more about like hiring client to contractor to subcontractor, and how all of those things are influencing up the change and making it so that you either can't go green in these verification systems, or they're precluding from people from getting work.
Well, I think right now what you're having is there's not really a preclusion of getting work. Everybody's still trying to figure out what their ESG program is going to be. And there's a big difference. And I think the difference is on the journey of where a company is related to ESG really begins with, are they publicly traded or are they privately held at the hiring client level? And down to the contractor level, because some contractors are publicly traded. Those organizations seem to be further along in their journeys because there's certain reporting, they're worried about investment dollars, and really that's why ESG, when we think about ESG as a whole, why we're reporting and doing all this is to give a comfort zone of compliance, if you will, to institutional investors and even individual investors that are putting their money behind companies, that they're not putting their money into a company that, you know, is endangering the environment, that is using child labor, that, you know, has some sort of corporate governance structure that's going to blow up in our face and we're going to have the next, you know, corporate scandal or whatever. So those companies that are publicly traded typically are way ahead in some cases of other companies. However, all of them share something in common, which is right now, we need to figure out what metrics we're going to track and what metrics we're going to require of our contractor network. And I see this in not only in Veriforce's system where they're collecting data. Other third-party verification systems are doing the same. And so all of a sudden, you're a safety professional and you just finished uploading your policies and procedures and your OSHA 300 logs and, you know, your EMRs and all this, then you get a question about how much water did you use last year, right? What are you doing to reduce your energy consumption? And we're like, wow, what are we doing? And what's our program? So, you know, that's where Mariner Gulf got really involved in developing individual policies and procedures for organizations related to ESG, particularly at the contractor level on, okay, now I've got this reporting requirement that I have to have to my hiring clients of what I'm doing in the areas of environmental, for example.
Yep.
So we need a written program that governs what we do. And then we need the training and we need the practice to go out there and do it. So right now, I don't know anybody across any of the platforms that has been denied, if you will, work based on ESG. Right now, everybody's trying to get it together. What's our program? What are we going to do? How are we going to track it? How are we going to report it? So we're trying to get fledgling programs up off the ground. And I think it begins with deciding, you know, what's our program within our organization? What can we do? Because yes, we have a responsibility. I said the other day, the quote, the business of business is business. And it is. That's an age-old truth. It is. But you also have to live on this planet with the rest of us.
Right.
And I don't think anyone can argue that, you know, the water I want to drink, I want it to be clean. When I go out and get oysters out of the Gulf of Mexico, I don't want them to give me leukemia. I want to be a responsible citizen in the corporate structure. So at the minimum, that's a little bit about what ESG is about. Then
Yep.
we move into the environmental is pretty easy, I think. Then we get into the social aspects of it. And this is where you blend safety and HR, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of these are HR policies, but the S in ESG, like we talked about a minute ago, really safety fits up under the S in ESG, in my opinion,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so now we're going back to the age-old discussion of what are you tracking? What are you tracking? Now, many organizations are only tracking injuries, but we've had this discussion a gazillion times in safety about leading and lagging indicators. So I think ESG is going to force down through the supply chain not only a recommendation to track leading and lagging indicators, but the necessity to track leading and lagging indicators. So you're going to have some metrics for your safety program. And what metrics are we tracking? That's its policy, an own individual policy right there. How do we gauge success? You know, one of my favorite quotes by Todd Conklin is safety the absence of injuries or the presence of barriers and defenses? Well, obviously, it's not just the absence of injuries. So as a safety professional, I need to be thinking about what metrics we're going to track in safety, right? How we're going to evaluate those metrics, and how we're going to report those metrics. And I believe this requirement, if you will, or these questions are only going to get more intrusive into your safety management system to help hiring clients determine risk. Because really, that's what ESG is about. You're looking at risk, financial risk, and governance risk, you know, social risk, all that's up under the big heading umbrella of risk that an investor takes when they invest in an organization. So from a safety professional standpoint, we're being asked to do more outside maybe of our comfort zones in the environmental side and in the social side, but that's where your HR people can help you, I think. But for many contract companies, they're not tracking anything much beyond TRR. And that's going to need to change if you have a reporting requirement for ESG.
So let me ask you this, because I know that your company does a lot of policy work and helping people kind of get on track for different things. And I know ESG is no different. I'm sure you saw this ESG requirement come into Veriforce, ISNet World, Avetta, Construction Secure, all those things. You've seen those come in as over the course of your career, over the course of your consulting career. And how do you talk to companies about, you know, they're probably going, I don't have my water use. How do you talk to them about coming up to speed and why it's important?
Well, the first thing I recommend is don't put this all on the safety professional. We got enough to do trying to get workers home safe from high hazard jobs. And many times we're understaffed and we have to over deliver. So there's a lot of things that go along in just the safety aspect. This needs to be a committee or a team approach, right? Some of these numbers are going to come from accounting.
Right.
Some of these numbers are going to come from operations. HR is going to need to be involved. So if you're setting up a fledgling ESG program, my recommendation is to form a committee of key stakeholders that are also decision makers that can help, first of all, work with someone to create your ESG policies. What does my ESG program look like? So you have an ESG
and that includes
program,
the committee stuff,
and that
right?
includes the committee stuff. Absolutely. So when we're thinking about our ESG overall program, then we have individual policies that fit within those programs. So in the past, for example, you might have a general waste management policy. Well, that's been a requirement for many hiring clients, both in and outside the oil and gas industry, manufacturing, construction for many, many years. But that's going to fit right up under your environmental. Okay. Everybody's going to have a general waste policy. What about your water usage, stormwater runoff type policies, your SPCC plans, and et cetera. So you've already got some of this, but it'll be organized up under the environmental. But then you got to think about greenhouse gas emissions, carbon reduction, things you may not have considered before. So it can be something as simple as, look, we're not going to allow our vehicles to run and idle all the time. I can't tell you, how many people take a company truck, go out on location, let it run all day. And I'm like, hey, you know why you do it? Because you're not the cat paying for that diesel fuel. James got a 6.7 liter twin turbo Power Stroke Ford F-250 Super Duty King Ranch Edition FX4 off-road package named Frank Roll Tide, right? Balance plates on the front and back. That sucker sucks down that diesel fuel. So when we turn it off, we turn it off, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it. Making sure that vehicles are maintained. So what do we need for that? We need a vehicle maintenance policy, right? And then once we have the program, then we have the assessment and the audit of the program for the continuous improvement cycle. So a lot of things we do in safety for continuous improvement and things like that, or you see coming out of manufacturing, the continuous improvement processes you see for that and related to quality and all, they apply to this whole thing. So first recommendation, get a committee together, have a governance structure for the committee, and then see what individual policies you already have and what you need, a needs assessment of what you need for the future. Then we got to train people. I've got to train people why it's important to turn it off. Energy usage, water usage. And then how are we going to track what we're doing? What system is easy to get the metrics, because I had a client ask me, James, I just got asked how much water I use. I don't know how much water I use. Does that, what does all that entail? I said, it's okay, man. It's a start. Let's start. Let's start.
I mean, the committee can go through and say, where do we use water? Right. And then people can become responsible for reporting that out. And I just wanted to add in there, a lot of companies are going to these software solution as a solution portals, right? Or software, right? Where they can put in all the safety metrics, all the environmental metrics, etc. This is just another piece of that. And when you're buying something, right, either have something that you can add on to or has the functionality that people can have access and they can do their part, right? So as you're training people that, you are responsible for putting in your water usage on X and X a date, and it pings you and you put it in, it'll roll up into something meaningful, even if it's the safety professional, the HR professional, the sustainability professional, so that they can access all the data and bring it into a package that can either roll into the verification systems or can be reported out to the hiring clients, right? And
because what's coming is this. There's a grace period right now.
Right.
All right. There are many companies out there that have created a model for scoring. But in the US, there's not a unified model for scoring someone's ESG program.
Or a global model for
scoring,
model. Right.
So at some point, there'll be a scoring model. Right now, it's a lot of data collection. It's data collection, but what does that data mean? And what does it mean to me as an organization that's either a hiring client or, a contractor within someone's supply chain? That'll end up getting figured out by somebody way smarter than me, right?
And me, yeah.
That's why I'm a safety professional, right? If I was a mathematician, I'd be a rocket scientist, but
right, or a statistician, right?
That's right.
Then you'd be a liar, but
you're the mathematician. That's why you're a certified industrial hygienist, and I'm just a safety professional, right?
Are you going to put it under industrial hygiene now? Is that where ESG is going to go?
That's where the math needs to be. It doesn't need to be over here on James. But anyway,
all right.
The scoring mechanism is coming.
Yep.
It's coming. So right now, everybody's still, back to my earlier remarks, figuring out what's my program and how do I track my metrics? How do I track my metrics? How do I track my metrics? So we begin on the environmental, and that's easy.
Right.
Okay. That's an easy thing. I move my carbon footprint from X to Y. Pretty simple math. Right. The harder side, and I'm gonna just put it out there, the political side of
Mhm.
ESG is in the S.
Yep.
It's in the social side, right? And so this is where your HR team has to be involved. Issues like pay equity, diversity,
Yep.
equity, and inclusion. You know, I remember
Labor laws.
labor laws. I remember when I first got representing a client, I first got a request for, you know, do you have a policy that says you're not going to use child labor in the U.S.? I'm like, yeah, it's called the law. That's the
Yeah.
policy, right? There's a
Yeah.
law that we have to
But
follow.
you got to have it
And
written
it
up
seemed
because
kind of
the
crazy,
verification
but
systems will ask for it,
there have been
right?
2 incidences in my home state of Alabama and one in Kentucky where companies in the United States were caught utilizing underage workers. One was a
Yep.
franchisee. So the corporate headquarters had no idea that the franchisee for a restaurant was out there inside their chain with the you know, corporation's logo on the front of the door.
Right.
And I've got a franchisee out here that's representing our organization. They got busted for using child labor. Another one
Yep.
in Alabama, a major automobile manufacturer, one of their suppliers busted for using child labor. But in both instances, and this is why I'm talking about risk and reputational risk, in both instances, the newspaper articles and the media attention didn't say, oh, Jimmy's LLC, that's a franchisee of this
That's right.
huge organization, was busted out there using child labor, or that a parts manufacturer within the supply chain of this organization. No, what they did come out there, they said a franchisee of boom, major
Yep.
publicly traded company, a
Well, because
supplier of boom, major
people know that.
automobile manufacturer.
People know that, and we know what gets in the news sells. I mean, we see things catch on in the news, and big names catch on in the news, and people need to know what the news is about, and that's kind of what they grab onto, right or
So
wrong, right or wrong, right?
if I'm an investor and I'm reading the newspaper and I'm like, here are 2 publicly traded companies and they're using child labor, all of a sudden maybe I don't want to put my money into that. And that's exactly what the S is about in ESG. It's about helping people make investment decisions, right?
Mhm.
So while it may seem common sense to follow the law, organizations are making sure that within their supply chains that there are written policies. And you know what's coming. It's going to be a scoring mechanism on whether or not you have these programs and how you're assessing those programs to make sure there's compliance. That's what's coming. So why is it important for a hiring client to have good ESG? Because it's going to be your name in the paper alongside your supplier, your contractor, your subcontractor, if you want to get down to that, when they run afoul of some of these labor laws, right? So when we're
And
talking, go ahead.
ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is not bliss when it comes to things that could come bite you later. You don't want to be that person in the paper. And some of these hiring clients, their supply chain is deep, right? Deep. And when I talk about deep, I mean, somebody's buying from somebody, or contractors to subcontractors to subcontractors of subcontractors. And, you got to keep a handle on your reputation way down deep into those areas, right? And it's hard. And if you don't track it real time, it's going to be hard to go back and recreate it at the end of the year or whenever the
you may
quarterly.
be protected by an indemnity agreement, but your reputation's not.
Right.
And ESG is a lot about your reputation, particularly on the S side of things. So
Right.
I'm not a human resources expert, nor do I play one on TV, nor did I stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night. Remember those commercials,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I'm saying you need a committee to come up with these policies. And these policies really need to be customized for your organization in a way to track it. So you need an overall ESG program. You need environmental policies. You need social policies and you need a way to track it. Now we'll talk about governance here in a moment. And that'll be something that you'll need to involve legal with when you start talking about your corporate governance. And that moves up the food chain to the C-suite and how the organizations run. But for the part that we have control over, the E and the S, my advice to safety professionals is, hey, good place to start might be the article you and Nikolai wrote for Professional Safety Journal back in March of this year. The safety professional's role in environmental, social, and governance initiatives. If you've not confronted that yet as a safety professional, the day is coming that you will. And just because you're privately held doesn't mean you're excluded from this. You may be included in this because the person you're working for is a publicly traded company, or they're a privately held company that decided, hey, we want to have an ESG program. So there's a lot of discussion about ESG in the news. There's politics are involved in ESG. Don't know where everything's headed, but it's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away
at all. It's not.
No. So let's talk about governance before we run out of time. Governance deals with board level decisions, some of the legalities that are involved. There are a lot of different acts that are involved in ethical conduct of boards and how companies operate. I don't see that as a safety function at all. But again, when ESG gets dumped, where can the safety professional go to get some of that information? Is it legal? The legal department? What if there's no legal department? Is it a legal advocate, somebody that you're going to hire to assist you? Is it the board? Is it the CEO? Where do they go?
Well, we're safety professionals, right? But we also function in the reality that the requirements are going to be coming down through Veriforce, through other third-party verification systems for clients that we represent at the contractor level. So you're going to get the first request, right? So where the safety professional fits in, I think, is identifying the need.
Yep.
Identifying the need. Larger organizations might have a business ethics policy, but you're typically family-owned business with 150 employees or less. They don't have a business ethics policy, right? Mm-hmm. They just operate ethically because it's the right thing to do. Well, it's just formalizing that, the capacity of the board and things of that nature. So identifying the need is one part. Now, we help companies develop foundational programs, if you will, to build a G compliant program, right? Mm-hmm. But to make it company specific, I think every organization's got some legal counsel that they turn to for something.
Whether it's inside or outside legal
whether
counsel.
It's inside or outside the organization, you may need counsel to run it over and make sure everything looks good. But one of the primary things I think that comes out of the governance side is some structure to determine ethics. So what is ethics within my organization? That means if I am the person in purchasing and, I'm not taking bribes, it's an anti-bribery type thing. You've got a policy on what kind of gifts can be accepted, et cetera, et cetera. How your board governed, how your board works, what's the accountability to the CEO, to the board, those type things are all within the governance side. And the smaller you get, the less robust that program needs to be, right?
Yep. So I just want to add to that. I mean, I'm thinking of like, where would I go in a smaller company, right? I think I might go, if I'm a subcontractor, I might go to the contractor and see what they do, right? What their litmus is for ethics. Hopefully it's good, right? You want to work for ethical people, or to the hiring client right off the bat, right? There are a lot of hiring clients that are very in tune with these things. And, hopefully you could find the right person that can advise you on what their litmus is for ethics and help you kind of fit your programs and policies into that at least into the mold. Maybe it doesn't fill out the mold, but it fits into the mold so that as you grow, you're moving in the right direction. You know, again, I go back to this, look for the helpers, right? Because not everybody can know everything. Again, I'm not a mathematician, even though I'm a CIH, and I, you know, I know some about environmental because I spent a lot of time in that. But you have to be able to look outside of your own comfort zone and ask for help. And again, you know, if you're aspiring to be like or work for company X, then that's the perfect place to go to try to find the person that can advise you on what they're putting into these qualification portals or into their programs and policies so that you can model something after them. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and I'll second that. And just sort of to recap this, you know, safety professionals out there, I'm one of them. Dr. Martin's one of them. A lot of this ESG stuff, particularly at the contractor level, is going to fall in your lap because you're the person that is responsible for the interface of your third-party verification system. So if you haven't begun your ESG journey, start now. Start now
Right.
by alerting management that if you haven't already gotten these requirements, they're coming. They're coming at some point. So let's put together a committee. Let's collect the policies that we have now, particularly under the environmental side. Let's look at the HR policies we have under the social side. Let's look at our governance programs that we have under our incorporation side, see where the gaps are, start filling in the gaps from the written programs, and start collecting data, collecting metrics. So, you know, from a safety standpoint, the metric that you're probably going to be responsible for is leading and lagging indicators. If you're not tracking those,
Right.
you need to track those. It's been a recommendation from OSHA all the way down. Every safety conference you go to, every book that's written about safety, people talk about leading and lagging indicators. Start tracking that, right? The number of trainings you've done, the number of safety meetings you've done. Those are important metrics for filling expectations under the S. It's not the totality of the S, but it's part of the S. So once we get that data on the environmental side, on the social side, now you've got metrics that you can develop on the governmental side, and you can start having a continuous improvement plan. But you got to start somewhere, and I think it starts with a committee, so it doesn't all fall on me. I might be the safety professional that assimilates it and coordinates it and puts it into the system. But you're going to need a team approach in any company of any size to begin to collect this data.
Yeah. And I'm going to just second something you said earlier. You need to educate yourself, right? Whether it's through trade journals or research papers or the internet or wherever you're going to go, your hiring client, wherever you're going to go to get the information, you need to educate yourself. And here's where some, you know, like if it falls in your lap, right, as many things do, it falls in your lap to coordinate it. Maybe you're not going to do all of the data collection, but you're going to be the head of the committee, or it becomes your responsibility to put this into the portal. And this is where some safety professionals become squeamish. You have to be diligent about the collection of those things and what that looks like. And you have to be articulate about what your ask is, because all these people are as busy as you are, right? And so when you send out the feelers and you ask for something, you also need to be clear, concise, articulate, and you also have to be a little bit demanding about how this is going to come in and come together, right? Because if you can't sell it and tell it, it's going to be really hard for company management to understand how this is going to come together and to mandate that other departments help you.
Eventually, this is going to be a criteria in work selection. Let's just be honest, right?
It will be.
It's not in totality at this point, but in several years, as the ESG programs and expectations mature, it'll be a criteria in hiring clients use in contractor selection. So might as well go ahead now, get ready for it, and establish processes. You know, it's just, you can't wait till the OSHA 300 logs are due to try to figure out how many injuries you had. You know, you can't wait till somebody starts asking about how much water you use to ask somebody, hey, Bob, how much water we use this year? I don't know, man. You know, so we got to start tracking it, having some type of data collection, a methodology in place, a process, and there are a lot of software tools out there that can help you do those things. You know, I wouldn't try to keep up with it on a spreadsheet or anything of that nature, but that's why the committee is important. You have a committee, you meet regularly, you hold each other accountable, you make sure that these things are being tracked on a monthly basis or however you want to do it. Bare minimum, you know, quarterly. I wouldn't go much more than quarterly, because if there's a gap and you wait to do it at the end of the year, there's no way to fill in the gap, right? But point being, you need to work as a team. You need to work as a team and come up with what works for your organization as compared to some of the asks that are coming from your hiring clients.
Love it. I think that's a great place to stop for this one, James. And again, with all of our episodes, it brings up a lot of different things for future episodes to talk about. So all of you that listen to us, stay tuned for more on episodes coming up. I will say, if you like what we're doing, or even if you don't like what we're doing, drop some comments in and chat with us on the YouTube channel or on LinkedIn when we post this as a link to go and view. We're happy to have the discussion. Both of us are kind of up on ESG now and moving in that direction with our clients. So, you know, we can probably provide some help. But again, like, follow, subscribe, share, be a part of this risk matrix. Come with us to the matrix and play here, because we've got a lot to talk about. So, James, it's been a good one.
It's a good one. Thank you, Dr. Martin, and thank you to all of you that follow us, that view these podcasts. We do it for you, and thank you for what you do to help get workers home safe from high hazard jobs. Till next time, be safe.